He Never Let Go, Growing Up with Mental Health, Surviving Chaos, and Finding Freedom Through Faith, featuring Pamela Waggoner Good. What does it mean to grow up loving a parent whose mind is at war with reality? In this powerful episode, Pamela Waggoner shares the deeply personal story behind her book, He Never Let Go, Overcoming the Trauma of Mental Illness with God's Love. Pamela opens up about her childhood with a mother living with paranoid schizophrenia and a father overwhelmed by exhaustion and responsibility. She reflects on the survival strategies she developed: perfectionism, achievement, relentless activity, and how those coping mechanisms eventually led to emotional collapse. What looked like strength on the outside was masking unaddressed trauma and deep self-blame. This conversation explores the hidden impact of parental mental illness on children, what happens when treatment separates families, perfectionism and productivity as trauma responses, the unexpected people who become lifelines, writing as a path towards sibling healing, releasing blame and embracing compassion, and how faith, surrender, and discovering that you are never alone. Pamela's message is clear. You do not have to carry burdens that were never yours. Freedom is possible, healing is possible, and love, even in the darkest seasons, never lets go.
This is Talking Addiction and Recovery, the podcast talking, you guessed it, all about addiction and recovery. Join your host, licensed professional counselor Andrew J. Schreier, as he and his guests break down recovery topics with raw honesty, delving into niche conversations around the topics of substance abuse, mental health, and gambling. We intend to meet individuals where they are on their own personal journey of recovery, with dignity, respect, and compassion. We'll do more than talk addiction and recovery. We'll explore it. We're glad you've joined us. Here with today's episode, your host, Andrew Schreier.
Our guest on this episode is Pamela Waggoner Good. In this gripping and heartfelt memoir, He Never Let Go, Pamela, always trying to survive and had no time to dream, takes you on an emotional journey to the depths of childhood trauma and the healing power of faith. From a young age, Pamela faced imaginable challenges, enduring a childhood marked by neglect, rejection, and emotional pain. Yet, amidst the darkness, a glimmer of hope emerged, a relationship with Jesus Christ. As Pamela shares her story of resilience and redemption, she vividly recounts the harrowing moments that shaped her early years, painting a raw and honest portrait of the impact of emotional trauma. You can learn more about Pamela in the podcast notes. Let's welcome her to this episode. On this episode of Talking Addiction and Recovery podcast, we want to welcome Pamela Waggoner Good. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Andrew.
You are the author of He Never Let Go, Overcoming the Trauma of Mental Illness with God's Love. Before we dive into the book, can you give the audience a little bit of a background about yourself?
Well, I have three siblings, and my siblings and I were children. I was around 4, learning to navigate life with a beautiful mind mom, like the movie Russell Crowe, who was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. So my journey starts there and goes through survival techniques and things I've done. And because of that, I have had many interesting jobs, many interesting people put in my life that I didn't realize, and it was by God. And when I look back at it, and so I learned to survive by jobs, constantly being busy. I had many different jobs. And so that has created a wide variety of things that I've done, like real estate, fitness entrepreneur, worked at a prison, men's maximum security prison. And then I became a surgical tech in the OR. And because why not? I can do these things. Who's telling me I can't? So my life has gone through that, searching for that peace. But guess what? That's not where I found it through all that. So anyhow, now I am retired from those jobs, but loving on my grandchildren, doing e-bike tour guides, and working at a tiny home resort. And learning to go around and speaking and sharing with others how God has come into my life and given me freedom for that trauma that I was surviving through.
When I read He Never Let Go, one of the things that stood out, and you even mentioned it right now, being as young as 4, it seemed like you were aware at an early age of some of the challenges and struggles that was going on with mom in particular, but also some of the stress and things that your dad was going through as well. When I do a lot of work with sometimes families and kids, there isn't always this awareness of what's going on. There might be some, this isn't normal, this isn't unusual, but it seemed like you had a pretty good idea that there was a lot happening at a young age. Is that accurate?
Yes and no. I was aware, but the minute I think I was aware how I lived through it and survived it, the same as my siblings, is you just push it down and you don't know that it's not unnormal until you sometimes spend time with other people's at their house, in which, interesting enough, I did very little of. My siblings did more of it. But, and of course, kids were not allowed to come to our house. And that's when it's when you go to like have parties at school and your mom's not there, or you see these moms bringing treats or they're doing all this. And eventually, as I got older, I did realize this is not normal, right? And so most of us, I just kind of kept it there, even in my dad's family, they never really talked about it. We just were, this is what we were to do. We were to go to school, we were to eat and get up and go. And then we did this and did this. It was never mentioned or talked about per se.
When you, there was a point of the book when, and I forgot what age you were at, but it was when your mom went away, correct?
Yeah, I was
And
12.
12, and I was very curious about that, what you knew at that time or what you were aware of at that time. Because one thing I think about, and I've worked in residential treatment, I've worked in places where people stay, they live there, they're gone for a while, and sometimes what they tell kids is they don't necessarily tell kids what's going on, or when I worked with men, it was dad's off working and he's gone for a few months.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that we miss when we talk about parents or going away for treatment or going away for getting help about the impact that that can have on kids. We think like treatment will be better, which means they'll be better for kids, but it is still being away. It is still being gone. So I'm curious, at 12, what was that like for you to have mom leave? Did you have any idea of what was going on, or did you find out later in life that what you thought happened? Well, now I learned more as the story came to fruition. What was that like for you?
Actually, the very first time she went away, we were very small. And my aunt took my baby brother, and my sister and I went to a friend's house. And I think my older brother went with my aunt too. That I knew nothing about. We were just told mom was in the hospital. We have to go spend time at this friend's. So very unaware at that time. Next time this happened, I was 7. And I knew she had gone to the hospital to get well. And that's when the doctor said, bring the kids when you pick her up. It will help her want to go home because she didn't want to come home. And that's when we had full on awareness of all these mentally ill people in this hospital because we were exposed to them. And it was a little unnerving and scary. So we knew that. And then the next time they actually took her away for good was when I was 12. And I knew what was going on then because she got violent and we were taken out of the house. And it was a couple of days before the sheriff came and got her. And we knew she was gone for good then.
What do you what do you think about now or reflect on now about what that was like growing up with a parent who was struggling with mental health and having some of the challenges that were going on, as well as you also write about your father a lot and him trying to work a lot of jobs. I think you mentioned him helping out a lot, just anyone, but being so busy, being so exhausted. What was it like to be a child and with all that going on?
It was chaos. But of course, you don't know the chaos because you know nothing else, really. And like I say, every now and then I would go spend the night in middle school when I started. And yes, the family dynamics was so different. I learned that I never wanted to go home. I didn't want that time to be done. And when I went to Bible camp, it was like, oh my goodness, We get up, we exercise, and we get breakfast. And then we go do fun stuff, and then we get lunch. And then we get to go have dinner and fun more stuff. I go, this is awesome. I get good food. I get to do all this. And that's when it started dawning on me, we don't live in that world. And with a mom, I think where most of my heart was for some reason, I I think I just felt protective and sorry for her. And I didn't quite understand, but I also knew my dad was stressed out. I wanted to see my dad, but my grandma was trying to protect him because he was exhausted.
Yeah.
And of course, I get that now as a mother, but as a child, it was the first time I felt major rejection. And I just went from there with that self rejection and more rejection. And it just stuck in my gut and was like someone just punched me. And I get it because my dad was super tired, but I just wanted someone to talk to, a parent, a dad, or something, right?
Yeah, you
And
wrote about that pretty clear and understanding of that rejection you felt, but then also tried to be compassionate for what he was just trying to survive and get through himself.
right. And I remember always trying to be aware as I got older. My sister was very rebellious, and I tried to not make any waves, just do exactly what he needed me to do. And to be quiet and to obey him and follow the rules and be the best rule follower. I'm a big rule follower. And I just felt always compassion for both of them and that they had so much on their plate and felt sorry for my mom and felt bad for my dad. And so that's kind of where a lot of that went until, I just started getting older and then found my energy outlets where I was a good athlete, where I could put that stuff and just pour into it. And when I started hanging out with boyfriends, their families, I didn't realize I did this, but when I look back, I searched more for the boyfriend family than the boyfriend. I mean, that was a huge part of it. They were my family. I had a family. I'd eat dinner with them and I'd go spend time with them on the ranch. And I was part of their family. And I still am to this day. And that was huge to me. And when I realized this is, and I didn't want to realize I was broken, but yet I was. So everything just shoved down and I just kept pushing forward. And so did my siblings. They just said that life's behind us. We're going forward.
I
They
know you
never,
mentioned I know you mentioned the part of being in athletics. You talked about that. And even from chapter one of The Darkness, this is a part that I highlighted was maybe if I run fast enough and long enough, I can escape. I thought after 2 hours in the gym, running and running and running like a crazy woman, then hitting the heavy bag for God knows how long, the agony quickly crept back. And I thought that was really important because I think exercise and movement definitely has its purpose and its place, but also it doesn't necessarily heal or address some of the things that are going on. So I like how you describe that you could run and hit a bag, and even after that ended, sure enough, those feelings crept back. So throughout your journey, have you had to learn that there were things that you did to get through it, survive, push it down, keep moving on, but then there were times where you had to do some other things to really address some of the issues and recover and heal from it?
oh, 100%. That's, I did the things that God has gave me, how I grasp onto um, the courage and the strength and perseverance of me forging through. That's what he gave me to survive as a child. And that isn't always something you can carry through life. You have to now move to something else, right? And try to find that. But I didn't. I just kept pushing to, I was this perfectionist and I had to be this perfect mom and perfect wife. And I'm perfect fitness instructor. I own my own business and perfect health. And I crashed and I burned and I broke deep into a hole. And that's when I realized, well, I can't fix myself anymore doing what I've always done. So now I need help. I've never asked for help. I never talked to anyone about anything, not even unfortunately, my husband, my ex-husband, because we were always taught you survive, you go through, this is what you do. No one in school talked to us about anything, or even our relatives. Are you doing okay? Do you need to talk? Do you miss your mom? Nothing. Oh, and my dad's saying, don't hold it in, because the doctors told her, if you hold things in, you're going to have a breakdown. That's what he told them about my mom. And he'd always say, don't hold it in, get it out. So I got it out exercising, like you said. But that's how I became so addicted to working out, so addicted to working and always staying busy and go, go, go. It didn't work anymore when my children were, ready, close to leave the home. And I broke. I broke bad. And I had to look deep and find out, where did this person go and why am I broke? And I had to admit I was broken. And that in itself, it's kind of like when an alcoholic or druggie admits, you know, this. And when I looked at my life and go, well, I was using that relationship I was addicted to it. It wasn't love. It wasn't this. It was addiction. It was addiction to this. And I have to work out all the time to get me through the night. Those types of things. Yes, I had to stop and realize I have to heal my spirit and soul. And that, let's take that approach now.
I love the part, and you talked about this in your intro a little bit about the people that came into your life. And this, on page 83, was this highlight I made was when people along my journey stood up for me when someone tried to knock me down and made a significant impression on me. And you mentioned before, like certain people that came into your life. And I think this is something we often don't talk about enough is those are people we don't expect to come into our life. Those aren't the people that we would normally think is our support system or the people that are going to have that impact. And I want to share this story and see if this resonates with you. I was pretty young, traveling with my dad for work, and I would sometimes travel with him to out of town and stay in hotels and stuff. And I had a really hard time sleeping when I was in my early teens. I really struggled. So sometimes, I'd be up in the middle of the night and I would just walk around the hotel because like it's 24 hours and there's like a lobby, there's right. So I
Mhm.
was, a little bit of a teenager, and there was this hotel that me and him went to a couple times for business, and I started connecting with the bellman, the bellhopper at this hotel. And after a while, he was just someone that like being present around or just saying, "Hey, how are you?" He just had this way with him that I never thought someone like that would have such an impact on
Mm.
on me. And also that moment's gone, right? Because this isn't someone that's going to become necessarily in my life long term. It was so momentary, but that time was so meaningful. I can remember it so much even after all these years. That when we talk about the people that step up for us and show up for us and make that impact, it's really not who we think it's going to be.
Yeah.
It tends to be someone that we never knew we were going to meet, someone that we never thought was going to have the impact that they did. Is that some of the people that you're talking about? Were some people in your life you didn't expect to were the ones that came up, stood up, and really had an impact on you during these times?
Oh, for sure. Like my neighbor lady and her daughter who took me to Sunday school, and then my teacher giving me my first Bible. That was only like they touched my life for like 3 or 4 years. And then I went on and did my thing. And that little friend did her thing. I did the world thing. She stayed where she should have. But I actually, just a year ago, was able to get a hold of that girl and tell her how much her mom did for me and her and
Wow.
send her. Yeah. And I was hoping I could do it before her mom passed, but her mom passed 6 months before I sent it to her. And so that touched my life. And you're right. And all the boyfriends, families, the way they touched me and the way they still, after we were not together, stay close to me. And just like you said, people along the way, some of the teachers, my sponsor, my cheerleading sponsor, who went to bat for me when all these rumors were flying. I mean, I wouldn't expected her to do that. I was shocked. And so I think some people knew a little bit more about my life than I thought they did. I thought I was hiding it pretty well. I did it for many other people, but um, yes, those are the people that came forward. And my ex mother in law, she became my mother. And I don't think she knew that. She was my adult mother and was a beautiful person and treated me like a daughter. And so she was there with me when I had my babies born. And she was there with me at my wedding. She was the one there with me, not my mom. And so I was I was just blown away. But the teachers that stood in there with me, my brother had the same thing. He had some coaches and teachers. He says I wasn't going to go to college, but they had set it up and they pressed him forward and people came and he got a scholarship. And now his whole trajectory of his life was 100% different because he said, I probably would have been a druggie and in jail. And so there are some teachers that are so profound and some, I didn't have a counselor like that, but some people that are put there that will guide you, whether it be an employer, you know, and other people come along in your life. And it is very, you don't look at it that way till you look back on your life, right? You didn't look at that guy until you look back on it, right?
Yeah, and I think the takeaway I always have with that is you never know when you can be that person. You know, like the smallest act of kindness can have such a lasting impact. And sometimes we think we have to do these grand gestures to help someone, support someone, but not everyone's asking for things to be fixed or solved. Sometimes for you it was someone to just listen or to see, and how we can all be like that to someone. This
Oh,
small little act of kindness
mhm.
could be that story of someone that had a lasting impact on another person. So when you wrote about that, that reminded me of some of those moments. I really, really appreciate it. So you mentioned your brother, and I wanted to ask this: how was the sibling reception to writing a book that? And I've always one thing I've always been curious to know is what if a family all wrote books about their experience? Like, how would that be to like see this family? You know, you could say like, here's two parents, here's three children. Like, what if all five wrote a book? Because what everyone experiences is different, how they saw things is different. So I'm also curious when someone writes a book that does share a lot about family and history, how was that received by siblings?
Such a great question. It was so interesting because when I was talking to someone about this, she says, you have like four books here. I go, no, I have one. My siblings have the other three. But no, I'm not. My story starts out somewhat like theirs, and then theirs goes in 100% different direction. And they would be very interested. And when my book came out, I talked with them in great detail about this. But I did say when it came out, I says, I'm not a professional writer. I said, allow some errors. And I told it how I felt. Now, if you feel, give me grace for that. Because if you feel you need your story told, then write it. Because I'm sure every time, seriously, I sat down and then I told them what I was doing. And, one of them got a little upset because I think they thought I was going to write about all the bad juju between us because we had some hard fights, right? And disagreements. And I go, no, 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 that's not what it really is about. Here's what it's about. And once they understood where I was coming from it, they're like, okay. But still in their mind, I think they thought, even my children, mostly my children thought, I'm writing this to heal, which was part of it, but they never thought I would publish it. And so it just kept going and kept going. And I would share some stuff with them. And so they were surprised I was going to publish it. But after they realized what it was about and what I was doing, they were all very supportive. And I even had the people helping me write it asked to interview them. And they did. And I got to hear the interviews because it's my book. So that was an eye opener, some of the stuff they said. And the writers came back like, oh, they're still really angry about this and they're really struggling with this. You could hear it in their voice and how they answered. Where I'm over here going, you know, those people had issues too. I look at it in such a different healing way right now. But so they were on board, and I would call them so many times and say, what do you guys remember about this? I was so young, my older brother had to fill in a lot of gaps. But my younger brother talked with my dad a lot and knew a lot of gaps. And every time there was 4 different views, every single time, about where dad was married or where mom was married or where they came from. And I just started laughing and going, 4 different views. Well, that's about right. Because anybody pretty much is going to say that, but especially traumatized children, right? And so what it did was help me learn my adult siblings as adults, not the kids I grew up with, the brothers and sisters I grew up with. And it
Yeah.
helped them learn me as an adult. And it was really good. And I had 2 of my siblings that would never discuss this stuff. And the other one, just so much, just with a few people. So it was good for them to start pouring it out and telling things that they were angry or hurt about, or what happened with them, because I had a very much older sibling. And his story started at 10 with this pain, where I was only 3 or 4. My baby brother was a baby. So our memories and emotions and what we grab from it was so different. And they have been great with this and very supportive with it since then.
That's an amazing perspective. So one thing is, I do often think of like the sitcom where one person tells their story and it shows the scene, and then someone tells their side of the story, and it's like similar issue, but then how one person acts is so different. And that's really like what it is. Like that's how it is. But what you mentioned was fascinating about seeing siblings as adults, because I think when we think about siblings and our own siblings, it's so easy to think about it as when we were kids, when
Yep.
we were children. So, at one point we begin to see our siblings as the adults and even older adults, because for so long that image has been of being young, of just so that's a really, I think that's not talked about enough or looked at when it comes to
Yeah.
sibling and relationship stuff. So that's a very insightful.
Well, thank you. Well, I think that the triggers you have are from your childhood, or really young adulthood. And now those are not those triggers still come into play. Even my son has some triggers. I go, sweetie, that was 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I am sorry, but I am this person now. Okay. And so I've learned so much, and I've learned, unfortunately, the hurts that I brought into my children's life because I hadn't been healed yet. But my siblings did the same thing. We all had so much hurt. We brought it into our lives as siblings and our spouses and our children, because hurting people hurt people. And, that's a concept when I learned, I'm like, oh, why didn't someone teach me this when I was like 15? And just the things I wish I would have known back then. But obviously, because I feel God has given me such strong strength to survive what I did, it was so hard to break it back down to where I could start healing. I was just hanging on to it too long.
When I read your book, one thing that seemed to be this balance, I'm curious how you respond to this. I never really saw blaming your parents for what they were going through. I didn't really see anywhere where there was like blaming mom for the mental health, blaming dad for being so busy, the exhaustion, but it was also not a denial of how it impacted you. So like being well aware of how this all impacted you, but also not pushing so hard that it was pointing the finger and blaming them for what happened. Is that a pretty fair view of
Very
it?
fair.
Like I
Yes, it
was
is.
yeah, I was almost like waiting to see that or to find like where was some, you know, pointing the finger and saying because of this, because of all that, this is what I went through. But I saw such a balance of compassion towards your parents, but also not denying that it impacted you, that there was no way around that. So I'm just does that resonate with you or what comes to mind when you hear that?
It's interesting you say that. It does resonate. And in some of the other podcasts, they did ask me, weren't you angry at your mom? Weren't you angry at your dad? My older brother was so angry at my mom, so angry. She blamed him for taking her dad away because she got sick and no longer can his dad take him fishing because he has to work two jobs and spend time with him. And he was more impacted by that. Um, we were so little, we didn't really feel that was just our life. We were kind of like born into that life when we got here, right? Almost. But very good. I mean, that is how I felt. I was never mad at my mom, ever, that she was sick. I would pray constantly that she would be healed. And when I got older, and she did kind of come out of her sickness for a while, I felt my heart broke because she never got to be around her kids and raise them. And as a mother, that would break my heart. Now, my father, I never looked at him and said, "You horrible man. Why did you hit my mom? You horrible man. Why did you do this?" He was my rock. He was my rock. Now, when I was mad at him is when he died and went away and left me. And I thought, you could have prevented this. He wouldn't have a surgery. And so it took me years to understand the pain, and he was exhausted and he didn't want to live anymore. And I get that, but I was still upset he left me. But I look at it as now I have the last half of my life with my mom. I have the first half with my dad. But he struggled through all this too. So no, I was never angry at them. I did ask some of my relatives, why didn't you stop him from abusing her? And they go, back then, Pam, nobody interfered in anybody's household. Everybody kept it to themselves. So,
How do you think you were able to do that? Because I think if even if there was blame towards them, I don't think anyone would fault you. So
well, what,
how do you think you were able to do that? Like,
well how would I blame my mom because she's mentally ill? That's not her fault. It isn't her fault. And in the research that I've researched, I mean, there's so many people now that have mental problems like crazy, and they know more about bipolar, and this, you're a counselor, but how would I get mad at a mom? My brother was mad that my mom wouldn't feed us. He didn't understand the sickness because he grew up with her all those years healthy, right? He was mad she didn't feed us. He was mad she wasn't there for us to grow up. Now my stepmom, I wasn't mad at her. She wasn't my favorite person. But after she burned me a couple times, I gave her the benefit of the doubt, man. But after she burned me, but even then, later in life, I realized she had a lot of issues herself. Now, does my siblings still harbor kind of some feelings for that? Yeah, I think they do. I don't think they were ever mad at dad except for when he wouldn't have his surgery and he wouldn't keep drinking. They were mad at him for that. I don't think they weren't mad at mom, except for the fact my older brother thought she ruined his life because she got sick. And as later in life he understands that now, he really does. But then he didn't for years and years.
I think part of what stands out for you is you seem to have a very compassionate outlook on people who you see the struggle, you see the challenge, you see what they're trying to go through, and that people, I think there's that quote you always hear about, you never know what people are going through, you never know what they're experiencing. And to me, you seem to have this approach to people that, yeah, you don't know what's going on. Sometimes you do, like you were aware, not fully, but in
Yeah.
general, that it just seems like, and that's hard, right? Because sometimes even that same compassion we ask to have for people we don't know, we don't always give it to people close to us. We don't always have that viewpoint because we think if they're our parents, they should know better, or if they're our friend, they should treat us differently, even if So I just think that's very compassionate of you to have that view, especially because I've seen it a lot where there's blame and anger and resentment. And for you, what I'd noticed reading it was just this balance of I'm not blaming, but I'm also not denying it's impacting me. And that's pretty important.
Well, yeah, I couldn't have got healthy had I not actually admitted what it had done in my life to me, how it affected me. Because I was trying not to let anyone say I was broken and that it hurt me, but it made things worse as time went on. So I had to admit that. But because I have been that hurting person and I've been there, I do try to look at it through others and go, oh my gosh, this is going on. And I had a neighbor, her review of my book was so, because our kids grew up together from age maybe 8 to 9, and they were right next door. And then I've stayed in touch. And after she wrote my book, read my book, she said, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I know you. She wrote in the review, I knew her. She was my neighbor. Our kids played together. I knew her for years. I didn't know any of this went on in her life. But now I couldn't understand. She couldn't understand how Dave and my ex-husband, got a divorce. She goes, now I get it. She goes, I understand all this. Even my really good friends, I went to them, talked to them, and they go, well, we just thought you could do anything you wanted to. We didn't know you had anything going on and that you were hurt. And I go, well, I did what I set out to do, didn't I? I showed everything. I didn't want anyone to think I was broken. And I didn't want to admit I was broken. So I must have done a pretty good job,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it doesn't work.
One last question, and I think there'll be a lot you'll say to this before we wrap up, is it's the title is He Never Let Go. Overcoming the trauma of mental illness with God's love. Can you speak a little bit about how God's love and faith played a role throughout all this? Was it something that was always there? Was there a point where it was more present and part of healing at certain points than others? Because when you read the book, it's not just a constant talk about it, but you see it woven in, you see it mentioned here. So I'm curious, and that being part of the title, how did that play a role in your journey throughout, or even more so when some of the overcoming the trauma and the mental illness aspect came?
Great question. So I was aware that, there was God and there's Jesus. And my mother was Catholic, and I didn't get a good vibe from them when I was grilled by the people asking me about my sin. I didn't know about sin. What sin? What are you talking about? You have me in this dark room asking me this stuff. It was really horrifying. So I ended up going with my friend to Sunday school, and it was all in Bible camp. My dad made an effort to get me there, and it was a whole different feel. So I met him for the first time, Jesus, there. But but I came back to reality of life and survival. And so as I went through life, plus my one thing that held me back, I knew it was there. I never reached out, but I knew it was there because I was angry. Probably that's why I probably wasn't angry at my mom or my dad. I was angry at God for not healing my mom. And so I kind of went through life that way. But when I broke, literally broke on the floor, I realized, well, there's somebody out there that's got to help me or I'm done. I wanted life to be over with. And I had a pastor say, he's right there, Pam, just ask, just ask. So little by little, I started getting up and listening to messages and going that route. And so as the more I did that, I started feeling less unworthy for some reason. I started listening to these messages. I even had, when you said something earlier about someone in your life you never expected to help you out, the young gal in my book that was 15 that recorded some songs for me and told me I was worthy and beautiful by Alicia Keys and all this. She was one that made a huge difference in my life. How she was placed there and made these songs for me, I don't know. And I'm a big song person, really big song person. And when I listened to the song Just Like a Pill by Pink, I realized I realized then that's when I had the addiction of that relationship, unhealthy relationship that was feeding me and not helping me get better, right? So as I went on, I just kept taking steps and steps towards scripture and towards listening to this. And when he pulled me up that way, and every time I started to backfall, I would start listening to different songs that helped me through it and to understand that I was a child of God. And when I was listening to this, and I was coming along and listening to this song, and it was called He Never Let Go. Through everything I've been through, he's been there. And when I look back to all the people he put in my life and the boyfriends' families, I realized he was there. I didn't know he was there because I thought he's not healing my mom. He's not here, right? But he was there. And he helped all of us get through this. And he kept my dad alive and healthy till we all became adults, before my dad had a massive heart attack at a young age. And so we were all on our own then. So I look at this and go, he never did let go. And he's still with me, but I still had to dig deep to find out why I would fall sometimes still. And how he helped me overcome that is to understand when I went to this retreat, I still had that little girl that was so wounded attached to my leg. She was still there. And I was still going off of those feelings instead of opening up my arms and letting them go, realizing what they were doing to me. Because a verse called John 10:10 is the ruler of darkness comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And when I realized that's what had been happening to my life and I let it, if I let that go and know that it's not my brother hurting me, my friend hurting me, this person hurting me, it's not. It's spiritual warfare. When I just opened it up, threw it out there, and I gave that little girl to go home to be with her mom and dad. And once I did that, it opened up a big road for me to overcome this and understand that he didn't let go. And if I keep following this path and understanding that I am worthy and quit self rejecting myself and I am loved and to love others and to admit the the trauma I caused myself and the trauma I maybe have caused my children and move forward with them. I mean, I was asked when I went to this trip, what did ask people three things, your strength and your weaknesses. Now we all know pretty much kind of what they really are, but until someone actually says this to you, you're like, When I had my son say to me, Mom, why don't you like yourself? And what kind of trauma do you think I've given him? And so it was an eye opener, to really work hard on myself. And my daughter says, remember, it's not always about you. So when things would go wrong or somebody was mad, I thought, what did I do wrong? What can I do to make it better? Why am I always making this mistake? Well, it's not always about me. Other people have issues too, and maybe they're bringing that to the table, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, I don't have to own everything. And when I learned that and learned that I didn't have to own everything in my divorce, oh my gosh, I can now be more powerful than I can be pitiful. It's so freeing.
Yeah.
It's so freeing.
Yeah, I think sometimes the one thing that we forget about with the challenge of control, of letting go of it, is the freedom that comes with it. That, like, you don't have to be responsible for everything. You don't have to take on everything. You can realize this is not my fault. This is not my doing, but there's this, it's easier said than done. That with a lot of letting go of control actually gives you a lot more freedom than you think by trying to gain more control over
Exactly.
things.
Well, you know what really turned the corner for me a lot is when I heard someone that is like my mentor, she's a pastor, say, it's selfish of you. Think it's your fault all the time and take
Yeah.
control. And you're being selfish. And I thought, oh, I don't want to be selfish. I don't want to say I'm selfish. And so that was a turning point for me to look at it that way.
Yeah, you see that, right? You see that in the movie or the show where someone's like trying to be like, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? What did I do? And someone's just like, hey, it's not about you. Like, even though the person's trying to like offer help or try to understand what they may have done, is that part where the person's like, hey, this is not about you.
Yeah. And that's freeing. I mean, it's so freeing, but you still think it's my fault. It's my fault. And it's so freeing. It really is.
All right. This has been a great conversation. And last thing is, what would you like to leave audience members about our conversation?
I think that knowing that you can free yourself of this heavy junk that you've been carrying around and suppressing, you got to let it go. And the fact that understanding you are made for so much more in this life than just to go through life surviving. And sometimes we keep ourselves stuck there. And I had to look at what the common denominator was in my issues, because my son kept saying, why do you think it's your fault or this or this or this? And I said, well, what's the common denominator here? In all of my life, it is me, and it is, to me, the ruler of darkness. So I have got to change some things, and I have got to work hard to make it better for me. I'm part of it. So.
Well, thank you, Pamela. The book is You Never Let Go, Overcoming the Trauma of Mental Illness with God's Love. We will have your contact information, website where people can get the book, and our podcast notes. But I do want to thank you for taking the time and having this conversation with me today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good day.
You've been listening to Talking Addiction and Recovery with Andrew J. Schreier. We're so glad you've joined us and invite you to connect further with the show and these topics at www.andrewjschreier.com. That's Andrew J. SCHREIER.com. You can also email us directly at talkingaddictionandrecovery@gmail.com and connect on social media. Instagram at Talking Addiction and Recovery, Facebook Talking Addiction and Recovery Podcast, and Twitter at TalkAR_podcast. To stay connected and never miss an episode, be sure to like, rate, and subscribe. Until next time, friends, let's keep talking addiction and recovery.